Hi, I'm Cameron, and I just read comics. I love them. Welcome back to another episode of Cameron Reads Comics. Today, I decided that with a new year, I want to set some comic book collection goals for myself. Seen this kind of stuff happen on other channels, and so I was like, hey, let me make a list because within the last year, I've taken like a dip on my CGC graded books collecting, and so the way I go about collecting is really I get my weekly pull box books, and I really don't hold back on those. I try to limit myself, but usually end up not. And instead of ending up with so many boxes of books, I think right now I have like 8 short boxes of just comic books. Instead of ending up with those that frankly aren't going to get read again, or don't add much personal value, I sell my runs when they're complete. So for example, Batman by James Tynion, the run just ended. There isn't anything. There's a couple covers that I will keep because I like those, and I don't get rid of stuff for the sake of getting rid of it. What I do, though, is I sell those books, my weekly pull list, and I buy books that are either CGC graded or I pay for the process of buying other things that I want in my collection. I do the same thing with my trade paperbacks. If I don't think I'm going to read them again, then I just sell them and I use that money to fund my collection so that I can, not be hit so bad when I post other omnibus hauls or whatever it be. So that being the case, I usually will just, now I'm making a list of CGC books that I want because it used to be random of what I want. So here are the CGC graded comic books that I hope to acquire by the end of this year. I broke them down by price. I told you now how I'm going to fund them. So I like to keep my collection reasonable. And I don't always go after books that are going to have the most, money behind them, the most speculative value. I just go off like, what do I like? And if I think that something's coming where this character is going to blow up, or become super popular, then I want to buy their book sooner because I just know that I'm going to be kicking myself for not having bought it sooner. Case in point, I have a Miles Morales, or it's a Ultimate Fallout number 4, 9.6 CGC graded. I bought that because I knew his movie was coming out. I knew everyone would fall in love with that character. I bought that book the week before the movie was coming out, and I got it at that time for like $125, and that book, I checked today, it is at least $600, and I got that not because it was a speculation, not because I intend on selling that book, but because I love Miles Morales, and I just wanted to make sure I had a copy of that graded before all the madness went down. So here is my first book, and so I broke these down by price. I only have like 6 books, so broke them down by price. Here's the first one, which I technically have already bought, but I'll talk to you about the process too. My first one is Wonder Woman number 1, specifically Wonder Woman number 1 by George Perez, with the classic George Perez cover. I'll clip it next to me right there. I got that. I want that in a CGC minimum 9.6, but I got to give you a spoiler warning. I am already in the process of submitting that to CGC and doing actually a whole video series on that because that book is specifically, CGC has opened up their last signing with George Perez. This book is not super expensive if you buy it raw, and there's like a bunch of raw copies out there, so it's pretty affordable. And even the CGC copy of that book is pretty affordable too. Like if I wanted to get a 9.8, I think it'd be about $200. But I also don't have to do that because I can go find a near mint copy, which is what I'm doing. Find a near mint copy and then sending it in myself to be submitted. I've submitted books to CGC before. Usually I like to cut out the middleman and just buy the graded copy, but whatever. This is what I'm doing now. So I'm hoping to get this book in at least a CGC 9.6 because it's not a huge profit. This book I just love this cover. It's been one of my favorite covers for a long time. I want to get it submitted, and you guys are going to be on that journey with me. So I think that book should cost me around, like, out of pocket, $150. That's not a major collection. But again, I don't get it because I think it's going to be valuable. I get it because I like it, and I want them in my collection. Next up, we have, I also try to do these in, like, an order where it's, like, financially compatible with me. Next up, we have Batman number 608 in a second print. So here's some context, and here's something I learned about the book while I was looking for it. So Batman 608, if you guys know, is the first appearance of Hush, or it's the first part. I don't know if it's exactly his first appearance. I think that's what it is. I don't know, but it's the first part. Chapter 1 of the Hush arc with Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb's Batman. Probably one of the most infamous Batman arcs of all time. I'm sure a million people, it got them into comics, or it opened the door, or it made the first Batman story they've ever read. For me, it was the book. I got Batman 608 for Christmas like that year in 2002, and I was like 8. So I did not know the book I had. I remember I cut it all up. I eventually bought 2 more copies of the first print down the line that were signed, flipped them, sold them. I was like, okay, this is just, no. It was just taking up space. And I was in a period where I was actually selling a lot of my comic books so I could afford a bunch of this stuff for my podcast and my YouTube. That being said, the book that's popped around a lot lately is Batman 608, the second print, which is a variant cover. And it is like from that run, one of the most famous covers. And I was like, I think this is like the most beautiful book I've ever seen. To the point where Jim Lee recreated that cover for Superman for Tomorrow, his run with Brian Azzarello. So now they're dual variant. They go hand in hand, those 2 covers. And I want 608 because it has been mimicked a million times over, and it's really popular. And also, I think that book is pretty affordable. It is, when I was looking up the pricing for that book, I checked it out. I am looking for that in a CGC 9.4 or above. That's the grading scale. Also, I don't think I said it earlier, I only collect CGC. I don't collect PGX. I don't collect CBCS. Maybe CBCS eventually, but not. I like the CGC labels, and to have that only be my collection, to know how it's verified and everything else, I'm a fan. That one I went 9.4, and what I looked at too with the price of that book, I think I can get that for around $300. So that's graded. Eventually, there's a Torpedo Comics near me, and I know that they do signings, and you could crack your slabs, meaning like break open your CGC graded slab and get it signed, and then resend it. So if Jim Lee, who's I live in Orange County, he lives in LA. Jim Lee was ever come down, which he already has done, to the Orange County location, I think I'd be down to crack my slab or buy that book there and do that. That might be how that happens, but that's a book I want, and the cover speaks for itself. Okay, next up, and this is learning from what I learned last time, and you guys might kick me for this, but it is what it is. Learning what I learned last time from Miles Morales about the movie coming out and about that character's, all the popularity surrounding him. One book I want after seeing the first look trailer and even the post-credit scene of Miles Morales, Into the Spider-Verse, I really want Spider-Man 2099 number 1. And I actually think that this book I could get in a 9.8. I think that, I set it for a 9.6. I'm always setting myself for 9.6 because, frankly, the 0.2% margin for error, if I ever get dissatisfied by that, okay, I'll hopefully be able to level it up. But the margin of price between a 9.6 and a 9.8 is absolutely dumbfounding. The only 9.8s I have in my collection are the ones that I have submitted. Maybe we'll do a video on that eventually. But so that being the case for those books, I'm not in a rush to go get a 9.8 of something and pay literally double the price for the top grade when the grade lower is literally 0.2 difference. So that being the case, Spider-Man 2099, if I can get a 9.8, that'd be great. 9.6 price, I think I'm going to be spending about $250 on that book, which, I don't know, I find very reasonable for that book and that appearance that's going to happen. I'm finding that very accessible. Now we're getting into the top tier books. And the CGC grades I'm giving you guys also are the bottom of my, it's the bottom tier. Next book, this is one I've wanted for a long time, and I think I'm just going to give myself this challenge this year. I ended up buying a lot of Marvel books this year with my and I'm for those that are wondering, I'm more of a DC guy. I love Marvel. I read a bunch of Marvel stuff. You've already heard some of the Marvel books I want in my poll or in my CGC grading, but there's some DC books that I think like the Marvel books are going higher and higher because number one, all the Marvel first appearances are in the Silver Age, meaning there are more copies. All the DC first appearances are in the Golden Age, meaning like Action Comics number 1, Detectives 27. I don't think I'm ever gonna get those books. Like I can live with that, about the only Silver Age DC book that you could convince me to get would be something like maybe like Justice League number 1, which is like Brave and the Bold something. I couldn't even tell you because I don't look at that. Or like Showcase number 4, which is a $15,000 book, which is just, I don't have that money. You've heard my prices so far. I don't have that kind of money. I'd have to sell a lot of comics, sell all my slabs, whatever, for something like that. So that being the case, I don't know how bad I want those kinds of books. And also with the Marvel books, their prices are soaring. So like if they're alluded to, like I would hate one of the key issues that I want eventually down the road, one of my grails for a CGC book would be SpiderMan number 50, which is the first Kingpin, Spider-Man No More story arc. I haven't even read Spider-Man No More stuff. I just love the Kingpin a lot. And I'd want that. That'd be a book I'd probably buy raw and then send it to get created myself just to save money, because I don't need... Anyways, this is just how I think about acquiring the books is, do I want it raw? Do I want it... do I want to buy it graded? Is it worth it to buy it graded? What can I afford if it's graded? If I buy it raw and then send it to be graded on my own, I can save money, That's my thought process with how I acquire my CGC books, or can I get it authenticated? Can I get it signed and authenticated? And that affects the value of the book. So there's lots of factors like that. So for this one, my next book is a DC book that is Green Lantern number 76. I would like it in a CGC, at least a 4.0. But because that's about as much as I can afford. This is, for those that know, the first CGC. It's the first Hard Traveling Heroes arc, which is the team up between Green Lantern and Green Arrow. It was kind of known as the arc where social justice actually made its debut in comics. That run is one of my favorite runs of all time. Dennis O'Neil, Neil Adams, who are two prolific creators. That I didn't know that run could be so powerful, and especially that issue in particular, where they kind of bust down the door. Where there's that very infamous panel where Green Lantern gets called out for not caring about the African American community. By an African American man. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment in comics that changed everything forever. What does justice mean? Kind of questions they were asking, and Dennis O'Neil's legacy, especially after passing away, it makes me reflect more on what he's brought to comics. And so this is an issue I've wanted for such a long time. I think the cover is beautiful as well. It's like so famous, and it's easy to look at the 7.0s. It's easy to look at the 6.0s that are like $1,500 books. I don't have that kind of money. Even if I was to sell all of my collection, and how bad do I want to sell all of my collection for one book? But a 4.0 in that series is about $350 to $400. I'm okay with spending that much on that to potentially level it up or whatever it be. That is a run that I've always wanted. I think I've wanted this book for at least 3-4 years. And so saying it, speaking it into the world, I'm going to put the pieces together to be able to buy this because I think it is a worthwhile purchase. Okay, now here are my last two, which are books that I have tried to acquire multiple times and are tough. So first one, I think, full transparency, I've tried to make a video series for this multiple times, and that is Saga number 1. I did a whole series of trying to, I think I've done it, I swear, I've attempted it 3 times over. Maybe we'll go for a 4th. Of the books that I sell in order to afford Saga CGC 9.8 number 1. when I was trying this, it was around $500. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can navigate this. I can make a YouTube. I think I started in early 2021. And then the book, I got up to like $450. And then you have to think about the tax on the book, at that point too, which is, I think for me, it's like 10% tax the way I think about it. So that's $500 for that book. And I was like, oh, that's a lot of money. I don't know. Back then I didn't even have a credit card. So I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And then, I remember I waited and it bumped up to $600. I couldn't find a copy on eBay for under $600. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, I'm just going to stop and I'll go buy 2 slabs that I really want, which I think I bought like She-Hulk and Thor 337, which are books I love and books I wanted anyways, so that's what happens. I'm like, okay, well, I can get 2 books that I really want and as opposed to this 1 slab. And, that's where my brain goes. So Saga #1 is one that I've always wanted for a long time. I want that in a 9.2 or above, 9.2 plus. And I think that for that book, I will spend what I was originally trying to spend, which is about $400. And specifically, I want that in a first print. I don't think I made that clear. There's a million prints of that book. And, for me as a collector, if I'm willing to spend the CGC money, I don't care if it's, I don't care about the second, third, fourth print. I don't care. I just want #1. I want it in our first print. I want it CGC graded. And then if Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples ever came around and did a signing, I would crack that slab, get it authenticated, do the whole thing. That is a series that changed my life. It changed the way I thought about indie comics. It opened a whole new world within this medium for me. So love that book. Last book on my list is Ultimate Spider-Man #1. Now, this has been a book that is actually really freaking hard to find. And if you're looking at it on eBay, careful. Because there are a lot of elusive, what's it called? Prints. A lot of elusive, oh my gosh, what am I saying? There are a lot of elusive copies and variants and prints on this book. And so they will trick you into thinking they're an original. And there's even graded copies of a KB Toys variant and a bunch of other variants that aren't quite true about this book. So don't get it twisted. I would like that book in a CGC 9.6 eventually. But I did not think, I literally put this at the top of my list when I was kind of bringing it down my price. I did not think this would be the most expensive book on my list. It is. For a 9.6 or a 9.8, which preferably I'd want it in a 9.8. This book came out in 2001. It should not be that crazy. I think it's going to be about $600. So this will be one that I definitely try and find raw in a near mint copy. I'll spend $100 on a raw copy. I have no problem doing that. And then submitting to CGC on my own. But if you look on eBay, it's scarce for raw copies of that book because so many people love this book. It's the definitive Spider-Man run. When I was in 4th grade, Target would do reprints of that run, and got me into comics. And I feel like I've read this issue more than I've read any other comic book issue because my parents wouldn't buy me comics. They wouldn't indulge me. They would, but not often. Not as much as, I just read this one. I picked it up again, I picked up the first omnibus later when I was older and it was in print. I think that was one of my first omnibuses because I was like, everyone's talking about this run. Picked it up, read it in 2 days, which is unheard of for me reading an omnibus. It takes me forever to get through those things. Changed my life. Made me fall in love with Mark Bagley, introduced me to Miles Morales, who I love. Lots of good things to say about those books, and especially that series' impact on Tom Holland Spider-Man specifically, huge. So, love those. Those are my CGC books that I want for the year. Please drop a comment. Tell me if you're a collector and there's some comics you want this year. Let me know what you want. Maybe it's an omnibus, maybe it's a trade, maybe it's a single issue, maybe it's Action Comics #1. Let me know what comics are maybe on your list this year. I'd love to see. My name's Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them. Make sure to clobber those like and subscribe buttons, as well as leave me a 5-star rating or review on iTunes when you check out my podcast, Cameron Reads Comics. See you next time.